Are you considering how you can set yourself up so you can work as long as you choose, in work that's meaningful and with a rich life that energizes you? Perhaps you want to keep doing what you're doing but be happier. Or maybe you're considering something entirely different, a new job or even a new career. It can be hard to feel excited about the future if you're not confident you can achieve what you want. Perhaps you're worried you're too old, or the job opportunities won't be there, or even worse, that you haven't got what it takes. Well, today I'm joined by someone who believes that this third chapter, as she calls it, can become the most energising and meaningful phase of our working lives. Robyn Greaves is a career change specialist and author of the new book, Your Third Chapter, How to Thrive in Your 50s and 60s and Beyond and Work as Long as You Choose. Robyn, welcome.
Thanks, Sue. Great to be here.
Before we dive into the book, let's start with you. For listeners who don't know you, how do you like to introduce yourself at this stage of your work and life?
So my working life has always been about change and possibility and opening new opportunities for people. I'm very attracted to the new, and I have a corporate background. I've worked extensively in the career change and transition space over many decades, and in the last few years in particular, I've really noticed just how many people are in this stage of life, 50s, 60s, who are, we've got an ageing population, people are living longer, they're healthy, well, want to contribute and people finding it really hard to find a way in and find a way to do that. So I'm super interested in that conversation, but I just find it a really fascinating conversation and an inspiring one. Like it is, most people have many more options than they realise. So really getting the word out.
So when you talk about the third chapter, what do you mean by that, and what distinguishes the third chapter from the first two?
Sure thing. So I like to talk about the third chapter of work because I like to think about work as like the chapters of a book. I didn't make up this. This is not my distinction. This is around in career circles. I think a woman at Harvard University a number of years ago now first wrote about the idea of these career chapters. But essentially, Sue, the first chapter of work is when we're consumers, not consumers in the sense of being of how retailers see us, but we're consuming resources. We have a long and dependent childhood, education, early career experiences. The second chapter are all the years of building and growing. So for some people, that's building expertise and your career experience, building wealth. For some people, building a family, building a business. Of course, there's many different stories, sub themes, exceptions, but that's absolutely fine. For the third chapter, that is a whole other chapter of career and life. For many people, it's later corporate career, and even on the other side of a corporate career, where you have an opportunity to create a chapter of work and of life that's uniquely your own on your own terms. For many people, contribution becomes a real driver at this point. So how do I make, for many people, it's the opportunity to make their greatest contribution.
I'm really, of course, interested in this idea of late career and what happens for women in particular as their careers have matured. It's a time when many women are at the peak of their career, but it's also a time when women make some really radically different decisions about what they want work to look like. What do you see some of the most common assumptions about women in their 50s and 60s that they bring to their thinking, I guess, about work and retirement?
So I think for many of us, Sue, in our 50s and 60s, when we started our careers, we thought that around this time we would be winding down or even stopping work. But that does not meet the reality or the aspirations of many people. as I said before, people are living longer. They want to contribute. They want to find other ways to work. And for many people, financially, it's just not a, we may live another 30 years. So if we gifted that opportunity, a lot of society is still, and our thinking around retirement is still set up around the idea that people don't have this extra time, and based on assumptions that just don't fit current reality. So I think recognising that and deciding where you fit on that. Traditional retirement does work for some people, and there are some, and for some people that that narrative works for them. But understanding that you have many options, and that things, we are in a new era, and there are many more options than people might realise.
If I think back on that time in the earlier part of my my life about women's careers, I never quite imagined that I couldn't possibly have dreamed of the life that I'm having now. And recently I did an online quiz through a reputable source that asked for a whole lot of data and then suggested that I might live until my late 90s. And I thought, oh my gosh, that really ignited in me a sense of the longevity that I might have in real life, to think about, well, I don't know, if I didn't know where I was going to go to when I was a consumer, I still might not know what that long life looks for me at this stage.
Expectations have massively changed around women's participation in the workforce, around who's working and who's not, around, we've had many technology changes too during our working lives. So to see that perspective and say, well, we don't need to buy into the narrative that we may have carried for a while. And certainly a lot of the superannuation industry has kind of, there's a lot of imagery around of people who are around the mid 60s walking the beach hand in hand. It's usually a heterosexual couple. We're kind of geared to that narrative, but being able to get above that and say, well, you know what, there's many other options and many possibilities, and I can do it in a way that's going to be right for me. I sometimes speak to people who've come across my book, even though it's only been out for a few months, who say exactly that sort of what you said before, Sue, but for them with a retirement version of that. So, all of my friends around me have retired. I have a number of siblings. That's not me, that's them talking to me. I have a number of siblings who have retired, and they're expecting me to do the same. They're looking for my house block on the Gold Coast so I can join them. But I actually don't want to do that. And I'm super interested now that I've started thinking about it, about these other possibilities and what I might be able to do and do differently. And I think the exciting thing too is that actually the world of work has massively changed in the last couple of years, and there are many organisations who are sourcing talent differently. So the rise of fractional work, interim assignments, all kinds of things that really play to experienced people, men and women. And it's a growing trend that I think it's also really important to call out, because many people get into that if they're still within an organisation, they may find that there's bias around. They start to feel a bit left out. People say to them things like, when are you retiring? Or, gee, you look good for your age, or other things that they may not intend to land that way, but can make you feel like, you might be on the slippery slope. If you find yourself out of work and trying to get back into the market, it can be very demoralising for people in later career. So what I'm saying is, rather than the idea of work being a full-time role and you have to get one of those, thinking differently about the ways of working and these non-traditional ways of working that are increasingly, it's a clear and growing trend, and very much play to experienced people is a very exciting development. And again, a lot of people are not that aware of it, which is completely understandable, because unless you've needed to, you may not have lifted your eyes to that horizon, but it's definitely happening and very, very positive.
Well, I'm interested to hear a little bit more about the methodology that you set out in your book, but you just used two expressions that I haven't heard before to describe different types of ways in which work is being considered. Can you repeat those and tell us what you mean?
Once a lot of interim work used to be more like, keeping the seat warm. So you'd go in for a period of time and just go through the motions while a permanent person was being recruited. But increasingly, organisations are utilising the experience of somebody to come in and actually do a piece of work. It 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 could be for a variety of reasons. It could be some leadership work. It could be fixing, systems that are broken. It could be all manner of different reasons why an organisation might do that, to mentor some less experienced people. But rather than somebody who comes in more like a consultant to give some wise advice, there's an emphasis on delivery. So somebody who's actually done it before, somebody who can say, I've done that 3 times. I can come in, hit the ground running, and for whatever time period, it might be 3 months, it might be 6 months, really, make some changes. So really interesting strategic pieces of work. And then a transition period that sometimes involves continuing to be involved with the organisation, or sometimes that's it, you're on to your next assignment. So super interesting trend. And as I said, borne out by now many conversations with a number of the search firms. Fractional work is when an experienced person, again, rather than the business taking the risk, or perhaps in this case they don't have the funds to employ somebody at a more expensive level, somebody comes in, perhaps it's a few days a week, perhaps it's a few days a month, and really sets the team up for success. So again, somebody who's got a track record, not just somebody who's thought about it, but who really knows what they're looking at, to set the strategy, to help people to have the systems, whatever they need in place to make it work. And then the organisation usually puts in place a less experienced team that person mentors. So this is a huge growing trend, and very, very exciting opportunity for many people in and across sector, and really plays to experienced people. You have to be experienced and know what you're doing, obviously, to do that sort of work. But if you are, and that appeals, there are many options.
That's really interesting. I certainly have seen lots of people on LinkedIn, for example, talking about having been made redundant, say, and then feeling completely outside the formal labour market. And so the sorts of opportunities that you're describing there are would really fit in. Well, except that some people really want to go into a next an ongoing role rather than something that's kind of specifically constructed in the way that you've described. But I guess if there's more variety of employment options, that certainly adds to the opportunities for people over 50, doesn't it?
Sure thing, yes. And what I would suggest, Sue, is that if you're looking for work and you're in that situation and in your 50s and 60s, consider an interim opportunity. Consider something that's whether it's a fractional, whether you offer as a piece of project work, but that's often a really good way to get back in and to dip your toe in the water and see if it is something that you would want to do. Because hiring decisions are much quicker. And if you're talking to decision makers, you can often, get the cross-sector experience. It's very attractive to, say, a local government employer to have somebody who's got experience and can come in with a fresh set of eyes from another industry. And so it's a real opportunity to widen your experience.
So let's go now into your book.
I wrote the book because I think there's such an opportunity with many, many people in this age group, wanting to work, wanting to contribute, wanting to find ways perhaps to work differently, and a clear and growing number of people who don't want to work in a full-time role but who want to create their own path. So portfolio careers are no longer niche. There's many people who are wanting to do that and set those up, and even to start to think about ahead of time, well ahead of time. That's definitely a message that I would say, like, start doing a few things, don't leave it till the last minute. And of course, things can change as well. We are in a new era and there's tremendous amount of change. So if you are preparing, that's a very good thing. So I would suggest doing that. A bit of a spark for me was actually a long time ago when I did a piece of work. It was in a retreat environment in Arizona, a retreat made famous by Oprah, but we had nothing to do with Oprah. I was working for a global consulting firm, and they, like many organisations of that, many professional services organisations, do move people around in their 50s and 60s. So these people were directors of the firm, and they were looking to move, but not to retire, to move into third chapter career. So this is more than 20 years ago, and I was very fortunate to be part of the project team on that. I thought to myself in the beginning, these people are not going to want, this is going to be hard work. But in fact, they had an amazing way of helping people reimagine what their next stage of career would be. Some of the people we worked with were even late 40s, so they gave people a really good runway. And for many of these people, they'd had international careers, so they were returning back to their country of origin. They got involved with advisory work, got on boards. Some of them went back to academia. People got involved with all kinds of different projects, like the sort of thing I was talking about before, the interim or fractional kind of projects. They stayed sometimes involved with key projects or mentored people within the organisation. But you can imagine from the organisation's point of view, the rich network of people that they created around the world by doing that. So huge organisational value. And for those individuals, not just work, but life. So they were able to, ahead of time, if they were moving, reconnect with people they hadn't seen for a long time, decide on hobbies and interests. Sometimes we worked with their life partner as well and did a similar thing with them, so that those that really sparked conversation, sparked deep thinking, sparked the opportunity to prepare ahead of time. So they created these amazing, 15-year next chapters, where they were, in many cases, were able to have a broader contribution than they had in their previous career.
Goodness, that sounds really positive and beneficial, as you said, to both the individuals involved as well as the company.
So that's really what sparked my interest a long time ago in doing a book, and then more recently seeing this trend. And we are in a new era. The AI is massively changing the workforce, and the length of time that people have that extra. If we're gifted that, some people are not given that gift, but if we do get that gift, as you said earlier, Sue, of maybe it's going to be something in your 90s. How do you set yourself up now, and how do you really use the time? And even if you have got, it's not about the money, but even if you do have the money, how do you use the time? What do you want to do?
And how does your book help women think about that?
So I've got lots of, we mentioned before, like the inspiring examples. So there's a lot of stories in there about people who are actually doing it. And I think that's super important because, unless you've come across those people, you may not realise what the options might be. The book also goes through a methodology that I've developed. It came in part from that work I did a long time ago, and lots of other things that I've done in the interim. I call it the 5D model, which because all the words start with D. So the first of the Ds is delve, and what I have in the book as well is a version of the pre-work that I use. So there's lots of questions there just to really reflect and think through, take stock, and then you come up with some keywords and phrases, and in the second of the D's design those into a rich picture, and that becomes like a it's an evolving, but it's a good picture, often with a metaphor or some words that describe purpose, whatever that turns out to be for you. People come to that in different ways. So sometimes, people really get a strong sense of that, and other people, it's more evolving. So whatever it is right for you. But bringing, these inflection points are a great opportunity to take stock and work out what really matters. So what's important to you does evolve over time. And at this stage of life, for many people, a lot of roles that they've held, which have been really important, including job roles and, work identity, but also personal roles. We're for some people, a parent, a child, a daughter, whatever it has been. So for many people, those roles have held a big part of who they are. And around this sort of time, 50, 55, a lot of those things start to loosen off a bit or even really change quite radically. Children grow up, people move into a new phase of life. So I say to people, it's less of a reinvention and more of a return. So you're actually coming back to what really matters to you. And I find many people find in there things also personally that they've really wanted to do, or even just fun stuff that they haven't done for a while because they've been so busy doing all of those other things. Work does take a lot out of you. Those roles can take a lot out of you. If you've been in a caring role, if you've looked after an aging parent, for many people, they've lost a bit of that, and that really helps you connect with yourself and your energy. It brings a lot of energy to people, getting involved with the things they really love to do. The third D is dream, and that's not about falling asleep and having a rest. That's getting creative, so bringing in there as well, and often that comes from the Delve design, but things that are creative for you, immersing yourself in different ways to do that. And I've also got quite a few different practices in there that can really help you just to tap into your intuition, your wisdom, that inner knowing that, again, we can get quite disconnected from in the business of life. So ways to just tap what's on the fringes of your awareness. We also move quite quickly then into discover, which is the fourth D, and that's very practical. So, you can't think your way often to where you want to go. You need to start running experiments, doing things. So I've got lots of things in there. And as I mentioned before, for many people, exploring that, what we call the hidden job market. And it's not about just, catching up with your mates and hoping that they might find something for you, but a much more strategic approach to uncovering opportunities and repositioning yourself in the market beyond a job role. The fifth D is deliver, and that's when you're doing it. You're living into not only life but work, your own third chapter on your own terms.
Great. And it's really struck me while you were talking that there's lots of things going on in this process. There's the thinking work, as you described it, and the creative work. And there's also the emotional work, and possibly tied to this sense of identity. What feelings or identity questions tend to surface most strongly at this stage?
Well, I think it's often a very big identity shift for people. And I describe the model as, it might have sounded a bit linear, but it's actually, we evolve into, so it's a very much an evolving piece. And I find people, it's very useful to keep connected to that and to even to do different parts of what I've just described. But for many people, how do I talk about my work now? Who am I now even without those roles and what I've been doing previously? I find that delve and design phase that I talked about, really doing that work and bringing it together, knowing that it's not going to be complete, like you're growing into it, really helps because you are talking about yourself and connecting with what's important beyond those roles and titles. And from that, you can start to talk differently and think differently about how you might position yourself in the world. but it is it's a big, it is a big transition, and it's often something that I talk with people about. And for many people, because if you are creating a new third chapter, a portfolio, people know you in one way, and they also, for some people, as we said earlier, more traditional retirement does work for some people. So some people find it quite confronting even that you might be having these thoughts of doing something different, running your own podcast. So,
I know.
so sometimes it's quite hard to sort of know what to say when people say to you, how's work, or even what do you do. So thinking about those things and how you're going to respond to those, and even keeping your not saying too much initially, keeping your own counsel, or finding new network people who are doing what you're doing, and having conversations with people who can understand and give you insight.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that the thing I would add to that is, and I've worked with women over time as well, where that feeling of not being able to talk exactly about what it is that they do now actually really changes over time. So if you were to ask them that same question in 2 or 3 years' time, they'd have a really strong perspective on and description of what they're up to and what they're doing. But in times of change, when that's shifting and we're not quite clear on what that is right now, and we're in that messy middle of transition, it can be pretty tough to try and say simply what I do now.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so in this process, so let me just say, one of the things I really liked about your book, Robyn, is that the strategies that you have for people to try in terms of the Ds are a whole mixture of approaches. Often these sorts of books are directed at people who like to write, and what you've managed to include really beautifully is strategies for all different ways of processing information, and so there's space in there to get really creative in this process as well. So I really like that about the book.
Oh, thank you, Sue. Yes, it's really interesting, that, I think. And sometimes I have people who message me, or I happen to meet them, and they say, oh, I've been journaling, and it's just opened up my whole world. There are other people who say to me, I hate journaling, I'm never going to do it, and it doesn't work for me, and I know that. And so it really is a matter of finding something that works for you, whatever that might be. But I also encourage people to try different things, because sometimes, it's technique, or, even you drop into different things at different times that work for you. So
yeah, that's right. It's like loosening up so that the new ideas can come, I think, is part of
yes,
the opportunity at this in these sorts of processes.
absolutely. I would encourage people to experiment with those different practices.
Now, before I mentioned that the sort of situation some people find themselves in when their work ends and it's beyond their control. But oftentimes I'm working with women who that's not the case. They're in a job, they might have been there for a while. They can sort of see that the end is near, maybe a couple of years away, but they're deeply unhappy in what they're doing and often feel really stuck. And what sort of advice do you have for a woman in that situation?
I think it's really important to pay attention to that. A lot of the time we can, again, get into the internal narrative or the social narrative. Oh, I'm lucky to have work. I'm getting older. The market's going to be really tough. Blah de blah, and convince yourself that what your body's telling you, what your energy's telling you, is not valid. I'm not suggesting that you pack up your desk today and leave work, because obviously we all have commitments. I think these signals are, again, an opportunity to take stock of your situation, and also of what's important to you now, because things may well have shifted. So spending some time in that reflection, getting clear, And then I would suggest starting to run a few experiments. You can only think your way there so far, and many of us have many more options than we realize. So pick something. It could even be a conversation with somebody out there that looks like they're actually doing a really interesting third chapter, and they look really like, like they're thriving. Flourishing is your word, Sue. They
Mm-hmm.
look like they're flourishing, and have a conversation with them. Prepare, for what you want to say, or what you want to ask. And so it could be that. It could be exploring some education. There's lots of free stuff around that you can do. It could be lots of different things, but give yourself a timetable and hold yourself to it, and start exploring is what I would suggest.
Mm. And so, where do you think women underestimate themselves or talk themselves out of these possibilities in their third chapter?
I think it's if you don't have role models around you, if you don't know many people who are doing it, it's easy to not look around and to not be aware of. I do think also many people are working pretty hard, and doing. As I say, work takes a lot out of us. If you are in a position where you're doing a role and it's really starting to get a bit boring, or you feel like you're spinning your wheels, you can feel very tired. You just can't wait to get home, and so it's easy to let that energy speak to you. Sometimes it's about finding even a little bit of something that you really do enjoy doing. I think many of us have been taught that you work hard, and then if you've got any time left over, that's when you do the things that you like. But in fact, doing as much of those things as you can really energizes you and brings you back to yourself. So I think that's another thing that many people, and certainly women, can underestimate the value of we talk a lot about self-care, but I've seen people who take up a hobby or interest that they hadn't done for a long time.
Yeah, it's really interesting because the what you tapped into there is this idea that we're a whole person.
Mm,
And if we're not feeling very energized in our work, that can be rebalanced by activating some other pleasure in another part of our lives that lifts our moods, lifts our energy, and has other effects in other parts of our lives. And I really appreciate that. And also, I had a little aha moment when you were talking about the low energy in a job that's not feeling great, and I was thinking that kind of feeds this idea in us as well that, oh, I'm really tired, will I even get another job? And without actually acknowledging that the tiredness comes from doing something that's not very satisfying.
absolutely, absolutely. And it's amazing how just even small adjustments can lift that up. So
Mm,
I think don't underestimate just the a really small thing that you can do that
mm,
starts to move that along. You don't have to say, you don't have to pack up your desk and leave. You can start just doing, even knowing that you're doing it can make a big difference. And
mm,
it is a holistic approach.
mm.
Uh,
Yeah, and really experiencing yourself as someone who has agency, someone who can make changes, someone who can experiment,
mm,
and experiencing yourself in a different way, I think is what you're saying is really part of that process.
Absolutely. Yes.
Mm, mm. So you write about, or your message is work for as long as you choose. And I wonder about what needs to change in the workplace, in organizations, for that to really be genuinely possible.
Not all organisations are sourcing talent differently, but many organisations are. And there's also a growing number of people who don't want to work in a job with a title. They want to work but work differently. So the interim, fractional, project based work, and increasingly organisations who are, so the search firms, and there's a number of talent organisations online like organisations that are around fractional work that people can actually find online and join. So there are many, depending on your skill level. Obviously, if it's interim search, you need an experience level for them to have the sorts of roles that are going to be of interest to you. But finding those different ways of working and finding organisations that are open to that. A lot of it's in how you position yourself. So this is not resume territory. This is not owner, because it's not a job. It's you're providing value, and you're looking for problems you can solve, people that you can assist, and then positioning yourself and your experience to have conversations and negotiate something. So it's a different, so I'm suggesting people step away from, I'm not suggesting you don't try and get a job through the advertised job market, through the traditional market. And for many people that I work with, it is about positioning themselves for that next role so that they do set this up. So, for some people it's finding a role now, but recognising that the way you set yourself up over the next few years will really open up opportunities going forward. But there is, when I say work for as long as you choose, there is a lot of organisations now who are sourcing talent differently, and organisations are picking up on this. And for the organisation, I mean, it's fantastic. Why wouldn't you do it? Somebody who's experienced, who can come in, who's not tied to the culture and the politics because they're, you're an outsider, so you have a different mentality than being an employee, and who can bring their expertise to solve problems. And it's not just advisory, so you're not a consultant, you're actually hitting the ground and doing it and delivering, and there's usually a really strong emphasis on that. So for people with that expertise, there's great opportunity. That's not the only work for as long as you choose. I know of people who are in their 70s who, there's a woman that I worked with quite some time ago now. She was actually a school teacher and very interested in writing. And it took her about a year, but she's been writing on Substack. She's now running workshops for women who want to write. Some of them want to do it professionally. Some of them want to express themselves, but she's got a business doing that. So this woman she's moved from Melbourne to regional Australia to be closer to her family. So she's still doing a lot of the things that you might think of traditional retirement. She belongs to a garden club and, a book club, and she does a lot of things with her family and takes time off to travel. But she's also working and contributing in this new way. And in many ways, she's making a broader contribution than she was when she was teaching. So it's giving her enormous, satisfaction as well. She's joyous about what she's doing.
There are lots of women in their 50s in particular, but certainly in their 60s as well, who want ongoing work. They want regular work. They want to know that they're got a job next week and the week up, the week after and the week after that. What are your thoughts about those women? Is there anything different that they could be doing to work as long as they choose?
Well, if you find yourself out of work and you try, so there's a few different angles that you could, that I could respond to around that. But if you are looking for work and you're finding the advertised job market, finding it tough, I would definitely look at doing something interim, fractional, consulting, a piece of project work, whatever it is. Now, dip your toe in the water. It could be that also opens up a different sector or a different, a different opportunity for you. So I would consider that because the lead times are shorter, and obviously it reduces the risk. I mean, a lot of the problem with the current job market is it's very hard for people to get seen and noticed. Recruiters are bombarded with AI generated resumes and cover letters, which is pretty easy to do, and so they're bombarded. And on the client side, people making those applications, it's very demoralising because there's hundreds of people applying, and many of those people probably can't get the job. But how do you actually get past that door and seen? So obviously, if you are strategically having conversations making yourself available, approaching things differently. So it's not catching up with your mates. It could be catching up with your mates. I'm not saying that's not a good idea, but most people find work through somebody who they don't know yet. It's often through the referral of somebody who's in their network. But, there's mates, and then there's people who you kind of know, but you haven't maybe seen for a while, who you know professionally. And then there's a whole lot of other people. I'd get very targeted around, what are the problems you can solve? What are the things you can do? What are the organisations you're interested in? And then find ways to make yourself visible so that it becomes, when there is a role advertised, they know who you are. And there may even be an opportunity to solve a problem, to negotiate something outside of a job that you can do, a piece of project work, and that often really helps people. So even if you've got your eye on a full-time role, what I'm saying is broaden your search, and even if that doesn't bear results, it will help you to become visible to the organisations that you're targeting. Again, that's one of the things that we've kind of all come through with the security of a full-time job. I need a full-time job. But for many people, it doesn't necessarily, depending on what you do, it doesn't necessarily represent security. And I think many people who are not in the corporate world don't realise how volatile it actually is. So if you have a corporate, it's different if you're not in the corporate world, but if you're in the corporate world, there is a lot of change, and there's no doubt that AI is going to deliver even further change in the next, quite soon, couple of years, already happening, but, really, really accelerating. So there's a great benefit in having a few different strings to your bow, and I think thinking about how you could reposition your skills beyond your role, and having those conversations and starting to, just seed the ground. You might decide it's a bad idea. And many people find that, they explore 2 or 3 options, and quite quickly, 1 or 2 of them, they think, no, that's not actually for me. But there is a lot of serendipity and luck in my experience in job search and even in career success, and it tends to favour the prepared. So I think that's a very, there's something about that. If you start really getting clear about what you want, if you start really getting out there and having a few conversations, it's amazing how things start to land. So I would definitely suggest taking that approach.
Thank you. And you mentioned AI there, and I wonder what your views are about the impact of, this is speculative, Robyn, and you might not have a particular view on this, but I'm sitting with this question myself, watching the young people in my family feel a little bit distressed about their future careers with the way AI is taking over their sort of potential work in the future. And I wonder if there is an age disparity here, like what your thoughts are about the impact of AI on older workers.
I think that AI really plays to the strengths of people in their 50s and 60s and beyond. For experienced people, I talk about this in the book, that there's actually aging superpowers. So yes, some things do go south as you get older, but for many people, and people actually, you may have had this experience too when you're coaching people, Sue, people actually say to me, it's like the veil is lifted. Suddenly when I go into a situation, I can connect the dots. My intuition tells me if something's off, and I know what I need to do. There's something about the wisdom and judgment that comes from decades of experience in the workforce and in life. And I think that with all of this change, and certainly with AI, you need that. You actually need to. Somebody, I'm not sure if they read it somewhere, but somebody said to me that they felt that AI in their organisation was like having a whole lot of, super bright, super quick grads working for them. So graduates. So, it produces a lot of information fast. It's amazing. It really can extend your thinking if you ask it the right kind of questions, but also it can confidently tell you something that's completely wrong. And and it doesn't get the nuance of the culture or history or what's happened before or what people might accept. And so that skill set of experienced people is actually hugely valuable, because why wouldn't you use somebody who's got a track record and knows what they're doing? And of course, you need to stay current. So being healthy, being really up to date. And I suggest to people, learn everything you can about whatever AI is in your space. Don't bury your head in the sand. Get onto it. Having said all of that in a very positive way, I think there are some people that that it is going to be tougher for, and certainly people in entry-level careers, because it's not the opportunity to learn in the same way. So, not to be despondent about that. There are going to be opportunities for people, but just being aware of that change. And I think the more you can do to diversify, as I said, who are you outside of work, doing as much as you can to run some experiments, to have different things that you're looking at, so that if one thing doesn't work out, you've got other options, is a good idea.
For a woman who's wondering if it's too late to redesign her career in her 50s or 60s, what would you say to her now?
Well, I think it's never too late, Sue. I think, again, that's something we can tell ourselves, or, society, even people, very well-meaning people in our sphere, can convince us that over 50 it's all downhill and that there aren't any options. But it's never too late, and you don't know how long. Some people are not gifted that longer life, but when you think about that and the opportunity of that extra time, whether it's another 15, 20 years of working life, if you're 50, if you live to be 90 or 95, that's a very considerable stretch. So there is time, and there's many more options out there than you might realise.
Yeah. What's something someone who wants to make changes, where might she start next week? What's something really practical that she could do?
So I do think that starting as soon as possible with one small thing is really good to do. So you don't have to blow it all up. You can start small. One thing you could do is have a look around for people who are flourishing in later career. Who are the people that look like they're doing it well, and see if you can have a conversation or two with those people. There's even a lot of free courses around. What's of interest to you? Start I said before, some people don't like journaling, but start a little book about what you're really interested in. What really interests you, and what are some of the things that you would like to explore, and then start exploring those things. And it can be a very good pattern break to do some of the things that we talked about in D for Dream. So even going to the galleries, getting creative, starting to do a lot of things that just open up possibility. For some people, that can be reading more widely. It doesn't have to be a big thing. It could be that you start reading for pleasure. A lot of people have lost that art, again, with the busyness of life, or because they've got to read a lot for work. But start reading interesting novels on things that you're interested in, or even just reading for pleasure, if that's something that appeals to you. Going to the gallery, getting a creative hobby going, something that starts to spark a different way of being for you, and reconnects you with what's important to you.
I really like that, Robyn, because it's about the how the brain operates, and by activating that part of our brain that brings in new stimulation and creates new neural pathways, it opens up other possibilities that we can imagine for ourselves and our future. So in finishing today, when you imagine your next chapter, what do you hope it's like for you? What do you hope it feels like for you, I guess?
Well, this great question, Sue. I mean, this is my third chapter. So, as I said, I'm on the other side of a corporate career. Genuinely, really enjoy what I do, not only coaching, but continuing to have these sorts of conversations and to broaden the conversation so that people do have options and insight into what's unfolding. And there's something great about being part of a community, about having conversations with people who are like-minded. So that's super important to me.
I'm with you on that one, Robyn. I'm really enjoying this conversation today, and knowing that there are people out there like you who are putting this information in the hands of women is just really awesome. So if you could change one thing about how society sees women over 50, what would it be?
I think the myth that it's all downhill. So for many people, the idea that we're in slow decline, or maybe not so slow, depending, but that in fact we do have these superpowers, that we really do have such a lot to contribute. People say that to me all the time. Professionally, I see things that I could not see before. My pattern recognition is incredible. For many people, they can also deliver a message in a way that's much more collaborative, and they can talk to different people in a way that they could not have done earlier in their career. They've learnt a lot of the art of how to position things. So not discounting any of that. Work and life got so much to contribute, and try and find people who think similarly and start to do some of these things to bolster your own confidence and understand what you really can do. For many people that I'm aware of, people I've worked with and people that I talk to as well, this stage of life, you can make so we say not so much winding down, but actually widening. You can widen your influence and make your greatest contribution.
Robyn, thank you for joining me today on Flourish After 50. I've really enjoyed this conversation, and I've particularly appreciated the wisdom that you've shared with us here today based on your years of experience. And I'm fascinated by some of the stories that you've shared about the changing nature of the workplace as well. And I really hope that there are people listening even from organisations who can also change the way that they think about women over 50 and everything that we have to bring to the workplace. Thank you.
Thanks, Sue. Absolute pleasure.
Thanks for listening to Flourish After 50. If today's conversation resonated and you're ready to take the next step, you can work with me one-on-one as your coach, join my 6-week Life on Your Terms program, or be part of a monthly discussion group where we get deeper into some of the topics on this podcast, the Flourish After 50 Circle. You'll find the details and links at flourishavter50.com.au or in the show notes. I'd also love your support. Follow the show on your favourite podcast app, share this episode with a friend, and leave a review. It helps more women discover Flourish After 50 and start their own journey towards what's next. This episode was recorded on the lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay my respects to elders past and present.